Go find another table, Mom. This one's for important people only. The voice of my adopted daughter, Vivian, cut through the elegant air of the Sterling Room, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. The silence that followed was brief, quickly replaced by laughter from around the table. My son-in-law Robert, my teenage grandkids Leo and Maya, and even my biological son Mike all joined in as if it were the funniest joke in the world. I just stood there, leaning on my cane, my face burning with humiliation as other diners turned to stare. The crystal chandeliers cast a golden light on the white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. But I felt a coldness spread through my chest like liquid ice. My name is Grace. I'm 67 years old, and I adopted Vivian exactly 30 years ago when she was just 8. 3 decades of offering love, support, and everything I had, only to be treated like an intruder in my own family. The only person who looked uncomfortable was my friend Eleanor, sitting at the end of the table with an expression that mixed shock and outrage. Our eyes met briefly, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between us. An agreement. Vivian, that wasn't funny, I said, keeping my voice low and dignified, despite the pain piercing my heart like a dagger. Oh, Mom, don't be so sensitive, Mike chimed in, waving his hand dismissively. It's just a joke. You know how Viv is. I knew exactly how Viv was. At 38, she had perfected the art of making me feel small, while maintaining a facade of a devoted daughter to the outside world. For 3 decades I gave her the best of everything. Expensive clothes, the best education, support for every venture she ever tried. Meanwhile, Mike, my 45-year-old biological son, received the same love and opportunities. The difference was that Mike, even with his flaws, showed at least a basic level of respect. Viv, on the other hand, seemed to cultivate a resentment that grew with each passing year, as if my generosity were a personal offense against her. Tonight's dinner was to celebrate Viv's latest venture, an expensive boutique I had helped finance with a cool $250,000. I was always helping Viv with her projects. When Mike asked for a loan to expand his software company 2 years ago, I offered him the same amount. The difference? He had already started paying me back. The evening dragged on with conversation flowing around me as if I weren't there. Viv bragged about her new collection of imported clothes. Leo talked about his golf lessons. Robert discussed his promotion at the bank. When I tried to mention the watercolor exhibition I had opened the week before, a dream I pursued after retiring as a university professor, Maya cut me off. That's nice, Grandma. Robert, tell us more about that trip to NYC. Every word spoken, every indifferent glance, every interruption was like a small wound. By the time dessert arrived, I had completely withdrawn, the familiar feeling of invisibility settling like a heavy cloak on my shoulders. I felt like an inconvenient relic, tolerated only because I could still be financially useful. That's when the waiter approached with the check, placing the leather folder directly in front of me. What's this? I asked, confused. Vivian's laugh sounded artificial and cruel. Oh, didn't we mention you're paying tonight? After all, that's what grandmas do, right? Spoil the family. Spoil. The word came out almost choked. I already paid $250,000 for your new store 2 weeks ago. And now you can pay for our celebration dinner, Mike added. It's not like you need the money with that huge house all to yourself, the comfortable retirement. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The total blurred my vision. $4,780. They had ordered the most expensive wines, multiple appetizers, the most exclusive dishes. Leo had ordered 2 desserts just because he could. I'm not paying this, I said, closing the folder. Vivian's smile vanished instantly. Of course you are. You always pay. It's what mothers do. Mothers support their children, Vivian, but they aren't obligated to finance their every whim forever, especially when they're treated with such disrespect. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Come on, Grace. It was just a joke. You don't have to make a scene. A scene. My voice rose higher than I intended. You invite me to dinner, humiliate me in front of strangers, and then expect me to pay almost $5,000 for the privilege? Mike rolled his eyes. Always so dramatic. This is why we prefer to go out without you. Those words hit me like a slap. So it was true. They met without me, probably laughing at my expense while enjoying the comfort provided by my money. Just a moment, please. Eleanor's voice cut through the silence. She stood up, grabbing her purse. Grace, that's enough. Let's go. I've seen how they treat their mother, and this is unacceptable. But Eleanor, Vivian immediately adopted a sweet tone. The night is just getting started. Eleanor gave Viv a cold look. I've seen enough for today. You need to learn to respect your mother. I stood up too, feeling a sudden relief that I wasn't alone. Eleanor and I had been friends since college. She knew my entire life. My marriage to Charles, his premature death when Mike was only 15. My decision to adopt Viv a few years later to give Mike a sister, and offer a home to a child who needed one. You're going to regret this, Mom, Viv said, the threat barely veiled in her voice. I faced my adopted daughter, this beautiful, cruel woman who had become so different from the scared, hopeful child I brought home 3 decades ago. No, Vivian. For the first time in a long time, I don't think I will. As we walked out, I heard the confusion erupting behind us. The waiter insisting on payment, Viv demanding he wait, Robert trying to calm the situation. I didn't look back. The night air of Chicago was cool and refreshing. I took a deep breath, feeling as if I had escaped an invisible prison that had been closing around me for years. The scent of gardenias from a nearby garden mixed with the smell of recent rain, creating a feeling of renewal. You okay? Eleanor asked as we settled into her luxury car. The soft leather of the seats and the silence of the vehicle formed a protective cocoon against the outside world. No, I answered honestly, but I think I'm going to be. Eleanor drove in silence for a few minutes before pulling up to a quiet cafe downtown. It was a cozy place with soft yellow lights and jazz music playing softly, the kind of place that invites conversation. We need to talk, Grace, she said finally as we settled into a secluded booth. What happened tonight wasn't the first time, was it? Tears welled in my eyes. The lump in my throat felt the size of a fist. No, it's gotten worse in the last few years since I retired. But since you became just a bank instead of a respected professor, Eleanor completed, her voice hard. I nodded, feeling the truth of those words like a blow. In the last 5 years since I left my position as a history professor at the university, the dynamic with my children had changed drastically. The requests for money became more frequent, the respect increasingly scarce. They treat me like I'm a senile old woman, Eleanor. As if my only use is to sign checks. Eleanor covered my hand with her own. Her skin was thin like tissue paper, marked by age spots, but her touch conveyed strength. Grace, we've been friends for over 40 years. You were a pillar of strength when I lost my Anthony out west. You helped me manage his companies when I had no idea what I was doing. I will never forget that. I smiled faintly, remembering how I spent nights studying accounting and business management to help Eleanor after her husband's sudden death. How we sat together until dawn, deciphering contracts and financial reports as she battled grief and insecurity. And now, she continued, her voice suddenly different. It's time for me to return the favor. I'm sick, Grace. The world seemed to freeze around me. The sounds of the cafe, the clinking of cups, the murmur of conversations, the soft music. Everything disappeared, replaced by a dull ringing in my ears. What? No. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I found out 3 months ago. The doctors gave me less than a year. Eleanor's revelation fell on me like an avalanche. My friend, my rock for so many years, was dying. The cafe around us continued its motion, waiters serving tables, customers chatting, life going on as normal, while my own world was completely transformed. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor managed a sad smile, the kind of smile that carries the wisdom of someone who has already made peace with the inevitable. Because I needed to get my affairs in order first, and because I wanted to be sure about a few things. What things? About how your children treat you. About how you've been living. She took a sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving mine. I've been watching from a distance for years, seeing how Vivian and Mike gradually changed, how they went from loving children to adults who seemed to see you only as a means to an end. I couldn't deny her words. The transformation had been slow, almost imperceptible, like water eroding a stone over decades. Small disrespects that grew, calls that became less frequent unless they needed something, impatient looks when I talked about my own interests. It's not that bad, I tried to defend, more out of habit than conviction. Isn't it? Eleanor raised a silver eyebrow. Grace, you were just publicly humiliated by your own daughter. They expected you to pay almost $5,000 for a dinner where you were treated like an intruder. That's financial and emotional abuse. Her words hit me with the weight of a truth I had been avoiding. For years, I had justified their behavior. Mike was stressed with work. Viv had insecurities about being adopted. They just didn't realize how their words affected me. What do you want me to do? I asked suddenly, feeling very old and tired. They're my children and you love them. I know. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes intense. But love doesn't mean letting them abuse you. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, and sometimes it means consequences. She opened her expensive soft leather purse and took out a heavy envelope, placing it on the table between us. The paper was thick, probably from a fine stationery shop, sealed with the logo of a renowned law firm. What is this? My will, Eleanor answered simply. And a proposal. I looked at her confused. Eleanor smiled, a mix of sadness and determination. Grace, when Anthony died in Dallas, you taught me how to be strong. You showed me how to run his companies, how not to let the male executives look down on me. You helped me turn a prosperous business into an empire. It was true. What started as a mid-sized import company under Anthony had, under Eleanor's leadership, become one of the largest business conglomerates in the Midwest with holdings in logistics, technology, and retail. The companies are worth almost $2 billion now, Eleanor continued. And I have no children to leave them to. I swallowed hard, starting to understand where she was going. The cafe seemed to have shrunk around us, as if the rest of the world had disappeared. Eleanor, no. I always planned on leaving everything to you, she went on, ignoring my interruption. You're the sister I never had, but after seeing how your children treat you, I'm afraid they would just squander it all. Not just the money but the legacy I built. What are you proposing exactly? I asked, a mix of apprehension and curiosity bubbling inside me. Eleanor pushed the envelope in my direction. Open it. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out a sheath of legal documents. The words seemed to swim before my eyes. As I read, my breath grew faster and faster. It's a kind of game, Eleanor explained as I tried to absorb the contents. A test for your children and for you. The will named me as the primary heir to Eleanor's entire estate with one condition. Over the next 6 months, I had to establish clear boundaries with my children. No more money, no more financial favors, no more allowing abuse. If I managed to maintain these boundaries until the end of the trial period, the inheritance would be confirmed. If you fail, if you give in to their demands, if you go back to the old patterns, everything goes to charity. Not a single cent for you or for them. Why would you do this? I asked, stunned. Because you deserve more than being a walking ATM for ungrateful children. Because I want my money to go to someone who will value it and use it wisely. And because, her voice softened. In the months I have left, I want to see you reclaim your dignity and your strength. I looked at my friend, this extraordinary woman who, even facing her own mortality, was more concerned with my well-being. And what if they change? I asked. What if they realize their mistakes? Eleanor's smile was both hopeful and skeptical. Then they will finally be worthy of you. But Grace, you have to be prepared for the possibility that they won't change. That when the money runs out, they will show you who they really are. I felt the weight of that moment, the choice stretched out before me. Continue as I was, financing disrespect and abuse, or set boundaries and potentially lose the relationship with my children. I'm not sure I can do this, I confessed. You can, Eleanor said with conviction. The same woman who faced widowhood at 37, who raised a son alone, who adopted an 8-year-old girl when many told her she was crazy, who became one of the most respected professors at the university. That woman can do anything. When I got home that night, I found 3 messages on my phone. One from Viv, one from Mike, and one from Robert. All furious, all demanding an explanation for my shameful behavior at the restaurant. None of them mentioned who had paid the bill. Instead of responding immediately, I sat on my back porch. It was a spacious property in one of Chicago's best neighborhoods, bought with my own savings after decades of hard work. The yard, with its carefully maintained garden, glowed softly under the moonlight. This place had always been my refuge, my sanctuary. I thought about how I had gotten here after Charles's death so young, only 42, a sudden heart attack. I found myself alone with a teenage son and an uncertain future. Instead of crumbling, I threw myself into my work. I transformed my grief into purpose, becoming one of the most dedicated professors at the university, rising through the academic ranks while raising Mike. Adopting Viv was a decision many questioned. A single woman of 37 already with a 15-year-old son. Adopting an 8-year-old girl with a history of abandonment seemed like a recipe for disaster. But I saw her in that orphanage with her big eyes full of hope and fear, and I knew she was my daughter. The first years were difficult but rewarding. Viv had her nightmares and moments of anger, her deep-seated insecurities, but she also had a laugh that could light up a room, a sharp intelligence, and a fierce determination. As for Mike, after some initial resistance, he became a protective older brother. When did it all change? There was no single moment, just a gradual erosion. Mike graduated, started his career, got married and had children. Viv followed a more turbulent path, dropping out of college, going through a series of failed relationships, starting and closing several businesses. And somewhere along the line, they both began to see me less as a person and more as a resource. My phone buzzed again. It was Viv. Mom, answer the damn phone. We need to talk about this ridiculous behavior. I took a deep breath and made my decision. Eleanor was right. It was time to set boundaries. I wrote a single message and sent it to both of my children. I will be available to talk civilly tomorrow at 3 p.m. at my house. No yelling, no accusations. I have some changes to communicate. I turned off my phone completely after that, something I had never done before. The silence that followed was both terrifying and liberating. The next morning when I turned my phone back on, I found dozens of messages, each more indignant than the last. I ignored them all and spent the day preparing for the confrontation to come. At 2:55 p.m. the doorbell rang. Viv was there, looking impeccable as always in her designer clothes, but with dark circles under her eyes that revealed a sleepless night. Behind her, Mike looked equally tired, a rare dishevelment in his normally corporate appearance. To my surprise, Robert was also there, looking uncomfortable. "Come in," I said calmly, leading them to the living room where I had prepared tea. "What the hell was that last night?" Viv started immediately, completely ignoring my request for civility. "Vivian," I said, keeping my voice steady, "if you can't speak respectfully, this conversation is over now." She blinked, surprised by my tone. It was as if I had spoken in a foreign language. For how long had I allowed them to treat me this way without pushback? "You left us with a bill for almost $5,000. "A bill that you created," I responded. "For a dinner you invited me to where I was humiliated and then you expected me to pay." "It was just a joke, Mom," Mike intervened, his tone conciliatory. "Viv didn't mean that stuff about important people." "It wasn't just last night," I continued. "It's been a pattern. You treat me like a bank, not a mother. Like a wallet, not a person." Robert cleared his throat. "Grace, I think you're exaggerating a little." "I'm not, Robert, and I didn't ask for your opinion." My direct response surprised him as much as it surprised me. It was as if a new Grace was emerging, someone I had forgotten existed. "What is wrong with you?" Viv asked, her voice a mix of irritation and a hint of genuine concern. "Is it that Eleanor? Is she putting ideas in your head?" "Don't blame Eleanor for the fact that you have to pay your own bill," I replied. "And no, it's not her. It's me finally recognizing a truth I've ignored for too long." I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts before continuing. The scent of jasmine rose from the cup, strengthening my resolve. Starting today, there are going to be some changes. First, there will be no more money. No loans, no investments in new businesses, no financial help of any kind. The silence that followed was absolute. The three of them stared at me as if I had just announced I was joining the circus. Viv's expression shifted between disbelief and outrage, while Mike seemed to be trying to process whether I was serious or not. "You can't be serious," Mike finally said. "I am completely serious. You are adults. Mike, you're 45. Vivian, 38. Robert, 42. It's time for you to live within your own financial means." Viv shot up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sharp screech. This is absurd. But I just opened the boutique. I need working capital. You promised you would help me. I already gave you $250,000, I reminded her. Use it wisely. Mom, Mike tried using his most reasonable tone, the one he used to close business deals. I understand you're upset about last night, but this is an overreaction. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. But not unilaterally. When was the last time any of you helped me? When was the last time you asked how I was really? When did you visit without asking for something in return? Their faces revealed the truth. It had been a long time. The silence that followed my words was thick and uncomfortable. Viv crossed her arms, her eyes glinting with a mixture of rage and panic. Mike ran a hand through his graying temples, a gesture he inherited from his father. Robert just looked lost, as if he'd been dragged into a family drama he wasn't prepared for. Is this some kind of midlife crisis? Viv finally asked, her voice sharp. You turned 68 in 2 months and suddenly decide to cut off your own children? I'm not cutting you off, I replied calmly. I'm cutting off the money. There's a big difference. Maybe for you, Viv shot back. But what am I supposed to do with the boutique now? I have expenses, suppliers to pay. Do what other entrepreneurs do. Seek bank financing. Cut costs. Work harder. I kept my voice firm. It is no longer my responsibility to support your ventures. Mike, always more strategic than his sister, changed tactics. Mom, we're worried about you. This behavior isn't normal. You've always been so generous, so available for us. And I am still available emotionally, I clarified. You can call me, visit me, talk to me. Just don't ask me for any more money. It's that old woman, Viv said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. Eleanor is behind this, isn't she? What did she offer you? A chill ran down my spine. It was incredible how quickly Viv could identify the source of a potential advantage or threat. Her intuition for opportunity had always been sharp. Eleanor has nothing to do with my decisions, I lied partially. Her influence was there, but the final decision had been mine. This is between us. Robert, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Grace, I think what Viv and Mike are trying to say is that this change seems very sudden. Yesterday you were well yourself. Today you seem like a different person. Maybe I was always this person, Robert, I replied, looking him in the eye. Maybe I just lost my way for a while trying to buy your love. Buy our love. Mike sounded genuinely offended. That's unfair, Mom. Is it? I leaned forward. When was the last time any of you came to visit without asking for something? When was the last time you called just to see how I was? When did you attend one of my watercolor exhibitions? When did you offer to help with anything? None of them answered. They didn't need to. We all knew the answer. This is the deal, I continued after a few moments. I am here as your mother. I want to have a relationship with you, with my grandchildren, but the financial tap is closed completely. Viv stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the hardwood floor. You are going to regret this. When you need us, and you will need us. You're getting older. We'll see if your pride is worth it. It's not pride, Vivian. It's self-respect. She grabbed her designer bag and marched to the door. Come on, Robert. We have nothing more to discuss here. Robert hesitated, looking torn. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something like respect in his eyes before he followed his wife. Mike remained seated, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. The room was now immersed in a disturbing silence, broken only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock that had belonged to my parents. Do you think I'm wrong too? I asked after the front door closed behind Viv and Robert. My son sighed deeply. I don't know what to think, Mom. This is unexpected. Life sometimes is. He stood up slowly. I need to process all this. Viv is going to be furious for weeks. Probably, I agreed. At the door he stopped and turned. Are you okay? Really? It was the first genuine question about my well-being he had asked in months, maybe years. I felt a small pang of hope, as fragile as a sprout in aid soil. I'm finding my way, I answered honestly. After Mike left, I sat alone in the silent room, trembling slightly. I had done it. I had set clear boundaries, refused to be used again. The feeling was both terrifying and liberating. My phone rang. It was Eleanor. "How did it go?" she asked without preamble. "As well as could be expected," I replied. Viv stormed out. "Mike is confused. I think I lost my children today." "Or maybe," Eleanor said softly, "you gave them the chance to become the people they were always meant to be." The following weeks were a strange kind of quiet. No calls from Viv, no messages except for a brief text from Mike asking if I had come to my senses. I didn't reply. Instead, I used the time to rediscover myself. I dedicated more time to my watercolors, visited old friends I had neglected, and joined a book club at the local library. And I spent time with Eleanor, whose days were now visibly numbered. Her face had grown thinner, her body more frail, but her eyes maintained their fierce intensity. Then, at the beginning of the 4th week after our confrontation, I received an unexpected call. It was from the school of my 15-year-old granddaughter, Maya. "Mrs. Smith, Maya is here in the nurse's office. She fainted during gym class and asked us to call you instead of her parents." I found Maya sitting in a chair in the school infirmary, looking small and vulnerable in her wrinkled uniform. Her pale face lit up slightly when she saw me. "Grandma," she said, her voice low. I sat beside her, taking her hands in mine. They were cold and trembling. "What happened, dear?" The nurse approached. "She fainted during P. Her blood pressure is low, and she admitted she hasn't been eating well." "Not eating?" I looked at my granddaughter, now noticing the thinness of her face, the dark circles under her eyes. How had I not noticed this before? "Can we talk in private?" Maya asked, looking nervously at the nurse. The professional nodded understandingly. "I'll leave you two alone for a few minutes." When the door closed, Maya broke down into silent tears. "Everything is a mess, Grandma. Everything." I put my arm around her shoulders. She seemed to have lost weight since I last saw her. "Tell me what's going on." "Mom and Dad are fighting all the time," she explained between sobs. "Ever since that night at the restaurant, it's just yelling. The store isn't doing well. Mom says it's your fault for not giving more money. Dad says she needs to wake up and learn how to run a real business." My heart ached. "I'm so sorry you're going through this." Maya wiped her tears with her uniform sleeve. "There's not much food in the house now. Mom is putting all the money into the store. She said we have to save, that we're in survival mode because of what you did." Guilt hit me like a wave. Were my boundaries affecting my innocent grandchildren? Then I realized it wasn't my boundaries causing this, but Viv's response to them. She was choosing to prioritize her failing business over the well-being of her own children. "Did you eat today?" I asked. She shook her head. "We're going to fix this right now." I stood up, determined. "First, we're going to get some lunch. Then I'm going to talk to the nurse and take you home with me today." Maya's eyes widened. "Mom is going to be furious. Let me handle your mother." And after a substantial lunch at a nearby diner, where Maya devoured a full plate, as if she hadn't eaten in days, I called Viv. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice instantly defensive. "What do you want now?" "Maya is with me," I stated calmly. "She fainted at school today from not eating properly." Silence on the other end. "Then what are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Vivian. I'm stating a fact. Maya is staying with me tonight. Tomorrow I'd like for you and Robert to come over for dinner to talk." "I don't need your lectures on parenting," Viv hissed. "This isn't about you or me," I replied firmly. "It's about Maya and Leo. If you truly care about your children, you'll be here tomorrow at 7 p.m. To my surprise, Viv showed up the next evening along with Robert and Leo. My grandson, normally confident and sometimes arrogant like his father, looked tired and disheveled. The family tension was clearly affecting both teenagers. I prepared a simple but hearty dinner. During the meal, the atmosphere was tense and silent until Viv finally put down her fork with force. "So is this why we're here? So you can show off how you can feed our children better than we can?" "We're here," I replied calmly, "because your children are suffering, and we need to find a solution." "The solution is obvious," Viv retorted. "Stop this tantrum about money and help us like you always did." Leo, to my surprise, interrupted. "Mom, it's not Grandma's fault that you don't know how to manage money." The silence that followed was sharp. Viv stared at her son as if he had just slapped her. How dare you speak to me like that? It's true, Leo continued, seemingly releasing pent-up frustration. Grandma gave you $250,000 for the store. And in less than a month you're already broke. You bought that ridiculously expensive Italian stock that nobody wants. You rented the most expensive space in the mall, and now we're the ones suffering. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Leo, respect your mother. And you, Leo turned on his father. You just complain but you don't do anything to help. At least Uncle Mike is trying to keep his own business running without whining for Grandma's money. Maya, silent until then, finally spoke. I just want you to stop fighting. I just want to be able to sleep at night without hearing yelling. Viv's face crumbled, the mask of indignation giving way to something more vulnerable. For a moment, I glimpsed the 8-year-old girl I had brought home all those decades ago. I'm trying, she said, her voice breaking. I'm trying to keep everything together. Alone. I added softly. Like you've always tried to do everything alone. Even when I offered real help, not just money. Viv looked up at me confused. What do you mean? How many times did I offer to teach you about financial management, about how to run a business? You always refused, preferring the easier path, just asking for more money when things got tough. Robert surprised everyone by speaking up. She's right, Viv. Your mother tried to teach you how to fish, but you only wanted the fish handed to you. Robert's comment landed like a bomb at the table. Viv turned to face him, betrayed by her own husband. For a tense moment, I thought she was going to explode, but then something unexpected happened. Her shoulders slumped, and she buried her face in her hands. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice muffled. I never did. It was such a rare moment of vulnerability that no one at the table knew how to react at first. Maya shyly reached out and touched her mother's arm. Leo, despite his earlier outburst, looked uncomfortable seeing his always strong mother suddenly break down. Vivian, I said gently, the problem was never a lack of ability. You're smart, determined, charismatic. The problem was you never really needed to try because I was always there to fix any mistake with more money. She uncovered her face, her eyes red. And now you've taken away my safety net. Yes, I confirmed. Because I believe you can fly without it. Robert took the floor, surprising me again. Grace is right, Viv. We need to solve this ourselves as a family. I looked at my son-in-law with new respect. Maybe there was more to him than the complacent man I had always assumed him to be. What do you suggest then? Viv asked, sounding genuinely lost. First, I replied. The children will come stay with me temporarily until you stabilize the situation at home. No arguments, no deprivation. To my surprise, Viv didn't protest. Second, I continued, I won't give you any more money, but I can offer something more valuable, knowledge. I will help you analyze the business, restructure it, make it viable as a mentor, not an investor. You're not a businesswoman, Viv pointed out, a hint of her usual distrust returning. No, I agreed. But I have been friends with one of the most successful businesswomen from out west for over 40 years. I've learned a few things. The mention of Eleanor made Viv frown, but she didn't comment. And third, I concluded, we all need to relearn how to be a family, not based on money or expectations, but on mutual respect and genuine love. The following days established a new routine. Leo and Maya moved into my guest rooms, visibly thriving in a tension-free environment. I started working with Viv at the boutique, analyzing her chaotic finances, identifying critical mistakes, and developing a recovery plan. To my surprise, when stripped of her defensive attitude, Viv proved to be an eager learner. I realized that beneath the layer of entitlement and resentment, there was an intelligent woman who had never been truly challenged to grow. Why didn't you ever force me to learn this before? She asked one day as we reviewed the projected cash flow. Because you were never ready to listen, I answered honestly. And because I was too busy trying to buy your love to truly help you. Viv paused, absorbing my words. I always loved you, she said finally. Even when I treated you badly. I know, I replied. But I don't think you ever learned to respect me. She didn't answer, but her silence was eloquent. Mike reappeared in my life 3 weeks after our initial confrontation. He came alone, without his wife, without the defensive posture he had adopted before. "I heard you're helping Viv with the boutique," he said, accepting a cup of coffee. "I'm trying," I confirmed. "And how are you?" Mike sighed deeply. "Well, to be honest, your ultimatum made me rethink some things. I realized I was on my way to becoming as dependent as Viv. So I'm focusing on making my company self-sustaining instead of counting on external capital injections." He hesitated, then added, "I also realized I barely know my own mother. Who are you besides the person who was always there to support us financially?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm many things, Mike. A teacher, an artist, a friend, a woman who discovered her own strength after being widowed at 37, someone who loves history and literature and long walks at dawn." "I'd like to get to know that person better," he said with a shy smile. The weeks turned into months. Eleanor's test to maintain firm boundaries for 6 months was halfway through when her health took a sharp decline. She was admitted to the best hospital in Chicago, an entire wing practically reserved for her comfort. I visited her daily, watching with a heavy heart as she faded. Her body might have been failing, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. "How are things going with Vivian?" she asked one particularly difficult afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. "Surprisingly well," I answered, holding her frail hand. "The boutique is starting to stabilize. She downsized to a smaller space, renegotiated with suppliers. She's learning to manage a budget." Eleanor smiled faintly. "And Mike?" "He's paying back the loan he took from me even though I told him it's no longer necessary. He says it's a matter of principle now. The grandkids are still with me, but they visit their parents regularly. The house is calmer. Robert is more present. They're slowly rebuilding." Eleanor squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "You're passing the test admirably, Grace." "It's not about the test or the money anymore," I confessed. "It's about finally having real relationships with my children." "That was the real test," Eleanor whispered. "It always was." Eleanor passed away on a quiet Sunday morning 3 weeks later. She went in her sleep without pain, just as she had hoped. I was by her side, having spent the night at the hospital. I held her hand until the end, silently thanking her for decades of true friendship. The funeral was a grand affair, as expected for one of the city's most influential women. Business leaders, politicians, prominent social figures. They all came to pay their respects. Amid that crowd of power and influence, I noticed Viv and Mike in the back, both clearly uncomfortable, present, more out of obligation than genuine respect. The reading of the will took place a week later. Walter Mendez, Eleanor's longtime lawyer, conducted the meeting in his office. To everyone's surprise, we were all invited. Me, Viv and Robert, Mike and his wife, even my teenage grandchildren. "Before we begin," Walter said formally, "Helen requested that this video be shown." Eleanor's image appeared on the large screen in the office. Despite being clearly weakened by her illness, she maintained that dignified posture and piercing gaze that always characterized her. "If you're watching this, I have already left this world," she began. "But before I reveal my final decisions, I want you all to understand the reason for them." Eleanor looked directly at the camera. "I spent the last months of my life watching how my dear friend Grace's family treated her. I saw people who should love and respect her treating her like a walking ATM. I saw the humiliation at the Sterling room. I heard the calls demanding money. I witnessed the disinterest in her feelings and achievements." Viv shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mike stared at the floor. "Especially you, Vivian," Eleanor continued as if she could see her in that moment. "The child Grace welcomed and loved as her own, transformed into an adult who treats her adoptive mother with calculated cruelty. You not only constantly demand money, but you seem to enjoy diminishing her." Viv's face turned red with shame and anger. "And you, Mike, may not be as openly cruel, but your indifference and willingness to exploit your mother's generosity are equally reprehensible." After a dramatic pause, Eleanor smiled. "So, I decided to intervene. I proposed a test to Grace, to set clear boundaries with you for 6 months. If she succeeded, she would inherit my fortune. But the real test wasn't for her. It was for you." The silence in the room was absolute. All eyes were fixed on the screen. "Grace, my dear friend," Eleanor continued in a softer voice, You passed the test with flying colors. You reclaimed your dignity, your self-respect. As for the rest of you, her gaze hardened. Well, the results speak for themselves. Walter turned off the video and picked up a document. The will is quite clear. The entire estate of Eleanor Campos, companies, investments, and properties valued at approximately $2 billion, is left to Grace Smith. Viv gasped audibly. Mike turned pale. There's more, Walter continued. Eleanor established separate trust funds for each family member, but with specific conditions. He turned to Viv. For you, Vivian, a trust fund of $5 million, accessible only after 5 years of proven work in a non-profit organization of your choice at minimum wage. No money from Grace can be used during this period. Viv shot up, furious. This is ridiculous. She can't do that. Actually, she can, Walter replied calmly. And she did. For Mike, he went on. A similar fund, but with the condition that he works for 3 years as a teacher in a public school in an underprivileged neighborhood. Mike was flabbergasted. But my company. As for the grandchildren, Walter continued, ignoring him, each will receive a generous educational fund, directly accessible at age 18 without parental intervention. Robert, who had remained silent, finally spoke. And me. Walter consulted the documents. You have the option to stay with Vivian during her period of community service, or divorce her with a compensation of $200,000. Chaos erupted in the room. Viv shouted accusations. Mike argued about the injustice. Robert seemed to be calculating his options. Only my grandchildren remained silent, perhaps secretly relieved to have their futures secured regardless of their parents' choices. I stood up calmly. Enough. To my surprise, everyone fell silent. Eleanor left me not only her fortune, but also the power to modify these conditions. I looked at each of them. And I'm going to use it. Viv immediately adopted a conciliatory tone. Mom, you know we love you. That thing at the restaurant was just a silly joke. I held up a hand, cutting her off. The conditions remain with one alteration. If you complete your respective service periods with sincerity and dedication, you will not only receive the trust funds, but you will also be reinstated as heirs to a portion of what now belongs to me. Everyone's eyes widened at the possibility of financial redemption. But, I continued, my voice now like steel, if you choose to contest the will, if you try any legal maneuvers, or if you continue with your past behavior, even that offer will be withdrawn. 6 months later, to my surprise, both Vivian and Mike had accepted the conditions. Viv was working at a non-profit for children in need, using her fashion skills to teach sewing and design to teenagers. Mike was teaching math and computer science at a public school, discovering a talent for education he never knew he had. Robert had opted for the divorce, choosing the money over a marriage that was already broken. Leo and Maya were thriving under my partial care, visiting their parents regularly and witnessing their transformations. On my 70th birthday, I received an unexpected gift. A photo album put together by Vivian documenting her work with the children. On the last page, a simple note. Thank you for forcing me to discover the person I can be instead of the one I became. The lesson was hard but necessary. I'm starting to understand the value of what you and Eleanor did. With love and a newfound respect, Viv. Looking out the window at the sunset over my garden, I silently raised a glass in honor of my late friend. Well played, Eleanor, I whispered. Well played. Perhaps, I thought as I closed Viv's album, the truest revenge wasn't destruction but transformation. Eleanor had understood that perfectly. By using her fortune not just as a reward, but as a tool for change, she had given us all a second chance. Not to pretend the past didn't happen, but to build a better future from its hard lessons. Sometimes the truest love isn't in giving someone everything they ask for, but in having the courage to say no when it's necessary. It took losing almost everything and gaining $2 billion for me to learn that lesson. But in the end, I gained something much more valuable. A family that was finally learning the meaning of respect and true love. Tales of Auntie Grace.